All right, I just have a few questions about your
Okay.
documentary, and thank you so much for allowing me to do this. So, your documentary, am I too African to be American or too American to be African? What made you decide to do the documentary?
My mother and my grandmother. My grandmother who came here in the late 60s to the United States on a fiance visa from my grandfather who had recently received a student visa. And she was about 22 or so when she came. And she just recently retired and moved back to Sierra Leone. So she spent more of her life in than she actually did in Sierra Leone, although she left at an adult age. And so you can just imagine how much she's had to negotiate the two identities. And then my mom came at the age of 12 to America, and she also had a series of different times where she felt more African to be American, or more American to be African. And I really saw that as she raised us, because again, as my grandmother, she spent most of her adult life and her life in general in America. And then me, having been born in America and growing up in this almost little Sierra Leone that my grandmother's generation has started to create in the Washington, D.C. area, I was surrounded by culture. I was surrounded by having our own grocery stores and different things. And it was kind of like you talked about some of these things that are in the film, but it was never something you talked about in open or you
Mm-hmm.
made a part of a national or international conversation. And everyone was like feeling as if they were crazy, but not knowing, from my grandmother's generation to my generation is something that we've all have experienced. So why not bring it to light, talk about it, and see how we can not only celebrate our differences but reduce tensions.
And why do you think there's a different disconnect between like black culture and African culture?
I think there's a disconnect due to lack of education on both parties. I think that at times they're both parties are feeding off of stereotypes, are feeding off information, and being educated by the media rather than really learning the histories and, the pain behind both sides and their stories and what their reality is. And I think once that's done, we will find that there are similarities between the two. And then we'll also be able to appreciate the differences, between the two parties. But until we talk about some of the things that hurt us and some of the things that, that that describe our experiences and bring that to light, we're never going to, move forward. If you don't address the pain, there's no way that you can move forward and work together.
What has been like your experiences like from do you consider like what do you consider yourself? Do you consider yourself black or Sierra Leonean or both?
Both. Both. I consider myself both because I actually, well, growing up here, I feel like when people see me, they see that I'm black first. And there are things that I do encounter a part of, black consciousness and the black experience. And I don't think that being black is, a negative connotation at all. Is something that I'm proud of and something that I think others should be proud of. I'm also proud of the fact that I'm Sierra Leonean, by way of my parents, and that I grew up in this very unique situation. I feel as though there's a lot of pressure to feel like you have to choose one over the other or whether one is better than the other. And I don't think that's the case. And I kind of maneuver in a sort of the same way I code switch, in the way that I talk is the way I code switch when it comes to I feel as though in my identity. And this is a topic that why I'm kind of doing my PhD right now, because this is something that I want to further research and understand because, throughout my film tour so far, Haitians, can relate. I had someone yesterday night in the NYC screening who was, from the Philippines but was born here, and she could also relate to some of the struggles in the film. We're teasing out identity, and especially when it comes to the landscape of America, when you feel like you have to choose a box and stick to a box in a sense.
I know, like some women in your documentary has said like they, and I've never thought about this from um, people from Africa when she was like I could pass for black, but now I look like I can't remember what country she's from,
Yeah,
but
she was from Sierra Leone. Yeah.
and she was like I can pass for I used to, but now I look more like I'm from Sierra Leone. Like, um, did you ever struggle with that? Like I've never thought about someone from Africa like can pass for black.
Yes, I remember being my freshman year in high school, and some girl was like, "Yeah, I can't stand Africans," and I'm just like, because you can't really wear a badge on your forehead that says, "Oh yeah, my parents are from Sierra Leone and I'm from Sierra Leone." So it's like everyone you speak English well, or you have, I guess, the markers of what tends to be black. You have this, you talk a certain way, you dress a certain way. So no one really questions you. And then she was like, I can't stand Africans. I was like, what do you mean? She was like, they're dirty and they're ugly. And I was just like, well,
Wow.
I'm African. And she's like, no, you're different. At least you're pretty, you know?
Wow.
Um, and so that was like, wow, like, okay, so you assume, I guess I've been passing for black without, whether it's consciously or
Mhm.
subconsciously. And then once you've been to her, and or from what others can perceive, but then once you start outing yourself as if it's either you get a pass because, oh well, she does have the newest Jordans on all the time. She is
Mm.
kind of cool, or you're like, that explains why she comes to school smelling a certain way sometimes, with the food or whatever the case may be. And again, that comes from the negative stereotypes and what we don't know about, you know, different countries within the continent of Africa. I actually had a phone call today from a friend of mine who will be traveling to Sierra Leone for the first time. And she was like, well, are there forests? Do I have to be careful with the animals, running around? And it's 2015. I think that with the age of the internet, you could be able to see and educate yourselves, but it goes to show that the media kind of trumps all in terms of people's perceptions, and therefore you kind of controlling or performing what you think what you want people to perceive of you, in a sense.
Did your family were ever afraid that you may become too Americanized, like get too engulfed into American culture, that you kind of like would resist your
Yes.
culture? Yeah. So
Yes.
um how do they balance the two for them to make sure that you still know where they came from and part of where you come from versus also living in America?
They were really hard on us, hanging around. Like, our friends were our cousins. You want to go over someone's house, they better be related to us. Like, what are you doing on the weekends? No, you cannot go to your friend's house because we have a wedding to go to. We have a pool night. We have christenings. We have functions to go to where you're gonna see the food. You're gonna hear the language. You're going to experience the music, the art. You're going to be engulfed in it.
Mm-hmm.
And what, you don't want to eat rice? Well, that's all I'm cooking all week, just because you don't want to you don't want to do this. I I think they also do that because you have to realize you're going to school here. You're actually spending most of your time in school.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of threatening in a way, because by the time you come home, you eat dinner, do homework, you're going to bed and you're ready for the next day. So it's like, well, you're definitely learning the American culture. So we kind of have to fight that by taking up the rest of your time and your friend circle in terms of your upbringing. But I definitely think that was a big fear. However, I also do remember my parents not wanting me to do anything that would make me stand out as much, because they did not want me to experience any, linguistic bias, or be treated any differently or made fun of, that would distract from my experiences here and growing up, or just being accepted. So they really they spoke the language to us, but they didn't pressure us to speak it because they didn't want us to, and it goes off of their personal experience, and it wasn't pretty for them or even my grandparents to have an accent.
Yeah.
It wasn't something that was cool. It's not cool to, so they also taught us at an early age that you do have to kind of not think about it. It's like you do want to pass in a sense, or you do want to code switch with your identity because it'll make your life easier, especially given that you have to, you want to get places and we want the best for you. And yeah.
Okay. What do you want people to take away from this documentary when they see it?
I want people to first and foremost be able to understand whether you're offended, you're like, oh, I can relate, or you're celebrating it, or you're upset, that, we are here to address some of these, what you find problematic and what you do like, that there is a pain, like you recognize the pain that is experienced in this film because this is their stories, and you wouldn't want anyone to silence you or take away your story, as well as the need for understanding that we do have similarities and that there is power in us connecting and building this bridge for cultural exchange. And there are things that we can both take away from each other outside of what we already do, that's similar, and appreciating the differences. And lastly, having this national and international conversation that is so necessary because, we tend to feel as though, oh, it'll fix itself. Every time we address these things, we're just further dividing ourselves. But I don't really think so, because if I can look at my grandmother's generation, my mom's generation, and now my generation, and it still hasn't been fixed, then we need to try a different approach.
And I know you're promoting this documentary and getting your PhD, but do you plan on doing any more documentaries after this, or?
Yes, I do, actually. I actually take a lot of feedback, and I appreciate all the comments, positive, negative, in between. I look at them, I read them, I dissect them, analyze them, and that is what's informing my next project. And I'm definitely very interested in creative and visual culture to talk about my projects because, as I've told many people before, the film was a way for me to start this conversation. Although it started off as my master's thesis, I didn't want, I felt like this was something that needed to be talked about, and I didn't want it to just be heard or read by 3 people on my committee. Using film as a way to make it accessible to, everyone, the diaspora, people in general, so that way we can start resolving some of these issues and celebrating some of these wins as well. So I think I will be playing around with different visual mediums, but I do see another film coming about. And my goal was to also make this a series of, conversations that we keep having.
And if anyone wants to watch the film, where can they go?
Yes, if you would like to watch the film, you can go to www.amithefilm.com. And the website is very simple, and you can watch it, and for a small donation of $10 you can purchase the film. The donation goes again to more research, and if you would like to do a public screening, you would need to purchase the public viewing rights, which is $200, and all you would need to do is email me at info@amithefilm.com to work that situation out. I'm trying to have everything where you can do everything online, and but still fixing this out, as this is like no more than a 2-man team. And if you would like to actually bring me as a speaker, you can also just fill out the interest form on the website, and we try to get back to you as soon as possible.
All right, and one last question. Are you kind of surprised at how well this documentary has been received, or how it has spread quickly, or the press that it's gotten?
Yes,
or that it's still receiving?
I am surprised about the press. If you would have told me this was going to happen, I'd been like, you're lying. Especially given that this is my first film almost alone in directing, in producing? No, I did not think so. But I guess it goes to show how, the topic really resonates, and it's something that maybe people have been yearning for. So I'm really happy. Um, yeah, I'm happy all the way around, and it's something that I think could be a useful learning tool.
Well, that's it for our interview today. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thank you so much for having me.